Thank you, Pete. Thank you so much. It just launched us into this new episode, which I thought we could just call it Let's Stop and Wake Up, because that just feels the vibe, you know. We can just really pause, and there's nothing to do to wake up. It's like just a stop. And I thought it's perfect to start our episode with this new article, which called Psychology Comes to Halt. David found this out. Someone actually emailed it to you.
Yes, my friend Ralph from Florida.
And the title of the article is Psychology Comes to Halt as weary researchers say the mind cannot possibly study itself.
Weary. Very tired researchers. Yeah, it's amazing. It's an amazing article. I mean, you know, it just takes you in from the title, Psychology Comes to a Halt, and then it says psychologists caution that it is a grave folly to believe anything objective can be learned about the human mind, given that the object of observation is, by its nature, also the observer. So it's kind of nice. It's like it's by The Onion, which is kind of a satirical, kind of a, you know, poking fun at things, kind of a so-called news organization. But actually, it's
amazing.
It is amazing
because it is actually very symbolic to say psychology comes to a halt. It's actually saying like analysis of the ego mind. Well, the ego mind find out that it can't find itself or can't really understand the parts, cannot understand the whole. Yeah. The dreamer cannot the dream figure cannot understand the dreamer. And it comes to this humbleness of finally realize that, and then everything comes to a halt or comes to a stop.
Yeah, yeah. And think it's kind of, some people think of it as a joke, but in A Course in Miracles, Jesus says it is a joke to think that time can come to circumvent eternity. And some people saw this article, I had a lot of comments, they said funny, ha ha ha. I mean, even the man who sent it to me was like, ha ha ha. And yet, it points to the truth. I think that's what's really funny. I mean, after a while, put-down humor is not funny. And anything that's really kind of sarcastic is not really funny. And most forms of humor in the world, you kind of outgrow them, like child's play, like toys, child's toys. And then this article is really so pointing to the truth that, you could say that it's a joke, and then you could say, my gosh, it's profound.
It is very profound.
That's the way I took it. I read the whole thing through, and I was like, wow. Amazing. Because a lot of saints and mystics, I think of Krishnamurti saying, I am the world is me. And if you just stop for a moment, that's all we're asking, everyone to do, is just stop for a moment. And if there is no objective world, if everything that you perceive is just subjective, and none of the subjectivity has any validity or reality, because it's just like lesson number 2 from the Course, I've given everything, I see all the meaning it has for me. Not that it really means anything, it's just that's a dynamic or a seemingly mechanism of projecting illusory thoughts and making an illusory world. But practically speaking, if you realize I am the world is me, I am the cosmos is me, then there is a stillness that's there, and then a joy as well, and then letting that joy just be what it is, extending and everything is really all that there is. There's really nothing to do, there's nothing to strive for, there's nothing to achieve, there's no personal enlightenment, there's no enlightened teachers, there's no point in trying to become a more enlightened human being even. That falls away when you start to see the observer and the observed are one.
Right.
It's amazing. And then I think you also see there, though, that if that's true, then all the mechanisms of time have no validity and no attraction. And really, honestly, how many people have really enjoyed a mortgage? I mean, I don't think I've ever met a person on the planet that's enjoyed a mortgage. And when you talk about paying bills at some point in the month, paying credit card bills, paying bills, back due bills and everything, it's just a sad story, really. And it's all based on one thing, that the observer and the observed are different.
Right.
And that there is this thing called linear time. What would a mortgage even mean if there was no time? I mean, how could it even exist? And it reminds me, even back in the pioneer days of America, when they would go out and they would clear the land and they would do all this work, but basically they received almost immediate benefits to the fruits of their labor. They would harvest food, they would eat the food. It was all much more direct, albeit still involving time. It was more of a direct experience. And then now it just seems like they talk about delayed gratification, where people do meaningless things and work meaningless jobs and are extremely busy, much ado about nothing, all for future gratification or just a thrill, a little pleasure in the moment, and then it's back to the grind of doing this. And really, when you stop, I don't think it's just us, I think most everyone comes to moments through their day where they go, this is insanity. This is absolute insanity to live like this. This isn't really life. I know everyone must have that thought every once in a while, this can't be life. Yeah. So That's what we're really looking at today.
The stop is really stop the thinking, the treadmill of the linear time, the thinking around the linear time. Even like in the ego is so subtle and sneaky when people, started to feel this or direct their attention from seeking from, wealth or security in the world, they start to seek internal satisfaction or awakening. It is the ego still put it into the future. At the beginning of the journey, it actually seems to be a big effort, because at that point the ego is almost like studying the course or the awakening together and saying, even in the course it mentioned the ego has no problem to think there is a hope as long as it is going to take a long time. Yeah. So really it's this idea has never really been looked at. It's this time idea. But gradually as, forgiveness seems like to be the means to achieve this holy instant, and when that is practiced and practiced more and more, the salvation is immediate. You see the simplicity and the immediacy of that. And really what is seen through and collapse is this belief in this linear time, this idea. And there everything happens in the future. Good things happens in the future, bad things happens in the future. It's all in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, really, without the future, if you just can stop for a moment and see that the future is just a construct, then just immediately in that instant of recognition, then all striving ends. There's no more striving. There's no more searching. There's no more struggle. There's no more challenges. Just in an instant of just seeing that it's just a construct. And then, there's not putting a thought into what will I do, where will I go, how will the body survive, all those kind of things, because it's all part of the same construct. It all just drops in one moment, and then there's peace, and there's no sense of a question even. You don't have a question.
It's like when the dreamer realizes it's the dreamer, not the dream character, then everything around the dream character becomes irrelevant. Like it's irrelevant because the dream is a dream is a dream, and the characters, there is no me in the dream anymore. Like all is the I amness, and just the question of an individual self, the survival questions, the money questions, security questions, relationship questions, and awakening questions. To think the dreamer, the dream character, one day will become, that is actually pretty funny.
It's back. It's all part of the same thing.
Yeah.
All those things are the same. Yeah. So you can't even fall for that one. That a person has to work hard to wake up or be fortunate or whatever. All the different things are. That all just is the same thing as well. Mm-hmm. So there's just a state of stillness. Then there's not a sense of trying to improve anything, and I think the main thing is that's how this has to be what practical spirituality really is. It's not really involving a lot of practices of the body. That was the way it could have seemed, but then when you come to this dropping to the still point, then the idea of practice ceases, because practices are repetitions, and repetitions in what? In linear time.
Right.
That's another trick. And I think I've noticed for the past several decades there was like this movement called Voluntary Simplicity. And I like both those words. Voluntary, meaning it's a choice, it's up to you, it's up to your mind, and simplicity. Somewhere someone just felt like there must be a happiness to be found in the simple, not in the complex. Not in the multiplicity and so forth. And we've been raised with all these cliches, variety is the spice of life, and different kind of things, but in the end what is simple is true, and that comes back to this moment. But it's not even, there's a temptation to think of simple forms, like a simple lifestyle. Well, what's a simple lifestyle? If the whole lifestyle is on the timeline, then how could you have a simple lifestyle. It must be a different way of looking at the world where the simplicity lies, not in the form. And I think those can be steps along the way. A lot of people have just said, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to simplify my lifestyle. And maybe they do kind of get out of mortgages, at some point, or say, I'm not, this credit card debt thing is crazy. I'm going to try to unwind myself out of that, practically speaking. Maybe they're in complicated relationships where there seems to be multiple purposes going on, and it's like a soap opera, like a drama, and they say, no, I want it much more simple. Then they start to unwind from that. And yet, what we're talking about is ultimately there's a realization that it really doesn't take time. It's not really a matter of time. It's just dropping into it. It's like a decision in mind to pull all attention away from the timeline.
Exactly.
Which would be from form too. You would really take your attention away from form if you did that.
Yeah, and that realization or recognition, actually, I was saying that yesterday, it's a blank spot to the egoic mind, because when the egoic mind is focusing on the timeline and the self, it doesn't really matter self what, even awakening. Am I getting there yet? Am I doing it right? Or other people get it, I don't. Any kind of, you completely block the realization, because that is mutually exclusive. The zoom in kind of way of thinking and the separation is exclusive to the awareness of the wholeness. That's why we're saying, pause, and you don't really need to do anything like that's because that's really just saying you don't have to think along the same lines as a person needs to do anything, as you're trying to achieve anything else. Like if you think along the same lines as awakening, which is like almost inevitable, this is habitual, but we don't need to think like that. As long as there is still belief or temptation to come back to this dream character, there is something seemingly to do, is forgiveness. And I just love this simple teaching of the Course. That's the only thing that really can open up the mind. Is forgiveness is dropping concept, is opening up, is not holding on to it. Is a non-action kind of doing.
Yeah. I think it's forgiveness is transcending all the self-concepts that the ego made up, that were just pursuits, like on the wheel of karma, just trying to pursue something. That's another thing I liked about this article, because even though it related to psychology and a psychologist, it was kind of like, stop whatever you're doing. Stop not because you're trying to stop something, but because there's nothing really going on. The whole article was...
this is a profound realization. It's not like we should stop, but this is a profound realization. It's almost like it comes to a full awareness of it's meaningless and going for nothing.
Yeah, it's not like you're stopping what was going on. You're seeing nothing was ever going on. That's really what this article is, and that's really what quantum physics is about. This is kind of like quantum physics meets psychology. Psychology comes to a halt. It's just funny that abandoning more than a century of clinical research, theoretical developments, and observational studies, psychologists worldwide announced that their entire professional lives had been utterly worthless, as the human brain could never comprehend its own workings, let alone understand its own understanding. Quote, "We've spent years trying to discern how the mind functions, but today I am forced to admit that this so-called research was nothing more than a fool's errand, and that we, the people of learning, were the greatest fools of all." We, the people of learning, that we could come up with a new, Declaration of Independence. We, the people of learning, were the greatest fools of all. This would be a good start. And then the United States, America would start to, again, regain prominence in the world. Look at them. They're admitting they're a bunch of fools. Now we'll listen to what's being said, not in its arrogance of thinking, you know something or whatever. Can the eye watch itself? Can a book read its own pages? No. It's now clear to us that despite all the painstakingly conducted studies and all the data we have meticulously gathered since the late 19th century, we have in essence been nothing more than the snake that devours its own tail. All that we thought we understood was merely a mirage crafted by the very unfathomable minds we once so stubbornly insisted we could know. In the wake of this development, sources confirmed that thousands of researchers at top academic institutions had resigned from their posts, effective immediately, and had been seen packing decades' worth of academic journals, as well as seminal works of such as Sigmund Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams and others, into boxes that will be placed into storage indefinitely or disposed of at nearby landfills. According to the reports from one prominent university, visitors to the psychology department found the chair's office locked, but with a note on the door that simply read, "It was all an illusion." For the past few days, researchers across psychology spectrum have reportedly discontinued their experiments and returned their funding to its original sources, stating that further investigations had been rendered irrelevant by the completely unreliable and fatally subjective nature of the human mind, of the ego. It, quote, "If only we could step outside these imperfect intellects for but one moment and observe our mental functions as they truly are, then that would be the end." And so the whole article really
is profound.
It's actually profound. It's just profound all the way through, and not only it's profound, it's practical. It's it's seen maybe from the world as a joke, but actually from our mind, it is actually the most profound thing that could be. If you fully realize it, you could stop the self-construct that you've been believing in an instant and be completely free. And not only if, it's actually inevitable, so it's like, why delay? Like Jesus says in the Course, why wait for heaven? Heaven is in you and you are home. Why waste even a minute, an hour, delaying? There aren't any loose ends to tie up in that because there never was a problem. So it's not like you finally have stopped the problem or found the solution. You've actually seen that there never was a problem. Amazing. So really what we've done, what we've experienced, and what those of us who are with us are experiencing is an actual call.
This is an actual experience. This is an actual experience that I have experienced, and I trust that's because there is no separate mind, so it's the mind that has experienced the same thing. That's the common experience after searching and searching and searching, comes back to this involuntary halt. Actually, the mind just stopped. And in that, it ceases chasing its own tail. And then, of course, there could be devastation, but there is a profound seeing that's happening in that stop, in that halt as well. That's why we were, thinking this is, yes, a joke, or we don't really care whether it's like so-called true in the dream
Whether
world.
it's the Onion or the New York Times,
Right.
It's good stuff. Yeah. I think it's so practical too, because when the egoic mind contemplates a stop or a halt, it's quite frightening to the ego, because that's a sense of stillness, that's a sense of not being busy. And right away the ego will throw in an idea like it's boring, or the ego always faces a halt or a stop with another question. It just has another question. What then? What's next? Isn't that, even when in our lives, when we've stepped out of certain concepts and we've stopped something, and then our parents or our spouse or brother, sister, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, somebody, neighbor, whatever, what's next? And then at some point in our lives, we don't even know how to answer the question. I mean, I remember when I was called out of this job I'd worked in, and it was such a strong call to leave, and they said, well, what's your next job, your next assignment, your next thing? And I said, I really don't know. But it feels so right. And they'd say, what? How can you say that? That's awful, to not have something lined up. All the best books in career management say, don't quit your job until you've accepted another one. You've got it lined up, you're ready to walk right in and do it the next day. Don't even surrender your job like a day before that, because you could, be caught without a job. As if, of course, that you need a job. And the Spirit's practical. If you've wound yourself into debt and you've got mortgages and bill collectors and everything like this, you're going to have to just be still and be open to be guided. Is there anything I should do, or what steps should I take? But we're talking about that moment where, I've known you for years, I just have never seen you running up credit card debt, or whatever you seem to have in terms of the world and properties and maintenance and things. You just let go. Then it was like, now. And then it's been more of an experience of just emptying your mind of everything, not even holding on to a scrap.
I have to say, the belief in possession, I don't really know it's the actual action of it, because that's irrelevant, but the belief of possession does not build strength, actually build up fear. Yeah. And to, be able to tap into another state, it seems to me that it informs letting go first, so that I can even experience it. I've never experienced not accumulating. Like, my life is all about accumulating, money and everything else as well. Security, to hide this hollowness and this fear, this terror of knowing myself, and then step out of that and just, even the stop that I know that I was reading the course in my final job. I have a computer screen and my lesson, and we'll hide my lesson when people pass by the spreadsheet, and then the lesson. But I couldn't really get it. I couldn't really read the text because it feels too far out from me. I could do the lesson at the beginning, and then I decided to quit. And after I quit my job, the second day, I went to the library, and that's where I pick up actual book of Course in Miracles, and just everything started to roll from there. And then one friend came to my house within a week and saw my book and said, we have a course group nearby. I said, I have no idea. And he gave me the phone number. I called. It was literally 5 houses next door. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I went there, and from that point on, like, the difference was, I picked up the book, I read, it was music. I just couldn't stop reading, couldn't stop crying. It became like just literally almost like within a week, from couldn't read it to like it became the most easy thing, like birds singing to me and music. And I couldn't understand what changed, because it seems like nothing has changed, but everything has changed.
Yeah, and like the compromise of even the job that maybe you didn't fully want to be there. Maybe you just started to say yes to those inner nudges that had been stacking up in there. And suddenly, it's music. When there was no resistance to it. Almost like there was no, well, if I read this, then it could cost me something. To, no, this music doesn't cost me anything. It actually gives me an awareness of who I am.
And I had, then I met this girl in the course group, and she looked at my book. She said, "This is the library copy, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh, I have been holding this book for," she said, extend for a year. And then she heard, "You need to return the book now." a week before I resigned, like now. So she did, because I was like, I don't want to spend $40 for something I can't read. You know, it was too expensive for me.
A library. Holy Spirit eased you in with a library Course in Miracles book.
Yeah, holding out my money. Like.
Said, quit your job, then we'll get serious here.
Yeah.
Well, that's the funny thing, you know, because, I don't know, I guess sometimes some people perceive what we're talking about is this major radical stuff. You know, quit your job, end your career, leave your family, leave your possessions, you know, all the stuff that's traditionally in, you know, spiritual mysticism and everything, which is so radical. And it seems actually, as you're coming towards those things and even contemplating that maybe someday you might, those seem like huge things, and yet we're here to say that actually that's just the beginning. Like that's nothing big at all. It's kind of funny when you go through it and then you come to the other side and you go, well, what's the big deal about that? Or why was I so afraid? Or wow, that was really just the beginning, just the very, very beginning. It's almost like those things are perceived as like that as soon as you do any or all of those major kind of things, that the skies will open up, a giant beam of light will come down, and it will be like, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. You know, I was waiting for you to quit your job and leave your children and leave all your possessions, and now you did, and you are thy beloved son, and I take you, I'm going to beam you up right now. It's like that's the beginning. There's all this other desires in the mind and attachments and everything that are much deeper and much more subtle. The roots, those are just like the surface things. They seem like a big deal on the surface. And then when you kind of go through those steps, maybe you go through all those steps and then you go, take me up, I'm yours, Lord. And the Lord's like, no, you're not even close to ready, but here, I'll work with you, and now your journey begins. That's not the beginning of the journey. Most people think that, you know, that St. Francis somehow, when he left Assisi and, you know, took his clothes off and let go of his name and his possessions and everything, that he just was an enlightened being. If you read his autobiography, that just was the beginning. Then came facing all of these things on the inside, where he lived at San Damiano and had all these friars that came and joined him, and Claire came, you know, if you've seen Brother, Sun, Sister Moon and everything. But they had to face a lot after they went all through that. So now it's like we go and we do some talks. We did a talk one time in England where I was booming the metaphysics, you were booming all the steps you took, and the whole place started to shake like a TV set that was just going to blow, like there was a volcano going to blow, almost like the world going, no, don't even go there. And yet now it's the same thing. We're sharing the same thing, but we're saying, oh no, that stuff's not big stuff at all. Don't think that that's radical. If you think that's radical, you ain't seen nothing yet, because you should see what the mystics and saints, so just go read what St. John of the Cross had to say. Just read the lives of the mystics and saints who kind of did all that stuff, which was just the show, and then they faced the darkness in their mind, which was still clinging to linear time. That's really all it was. The root is just clinging to linear time.
Yeah. It's like truly the call of the heart, or the call of anything, is freedom. And to build up all this money and job is this mistaken or twisted belief that is going to offer freedom. You know, as long as I build up some wealth, I can do what I want to do. But that is such a trap, because the assumption is intact, and the prison bar is actually never been, you know, seen. Yeah. Because the mind is not free, and it wants to find freedom in the body. And that's why it's just the whole thing is upside down. And then when when we remove what seems to provide security from outside, then at least there is an openness for you to tap into, to see, you know, what is really there, what wants to come up that we try to avoid, is actually to look into the mind, to see the mind wants to be free. Yeah. We all want to live in inspiration ourselves. We don't want to live in a life that is no, you can't do this, no, you shouldn't do this, you have to do this first before anything. It's like this deep desire to just like sky is the limit, or sky is not even the limit. You can do anything that you feel, you're inspired, you're the free spirit. But it's not even about the doing of it. It's like still symbolic of the mind wants to be recognizing itself, wants to be free.
Yeah, I think that's what was helpful for me about the Course. I mean, I was getting the message in all kinds of different ways, and I felt like I was going way down the rabbit hole really fast. But I was just at the top of the rabbit hole. I thought I was ready to hit the bottom, but with the Course, just opening the Course, I could realize, oh, I'm not at the bottom of the rabbit hole at all. I mean, but it started to make things really clear, like we were talking about freedom. I think you and I and most everyone is drawn to freedom. But to have Jesus give just one sentence, what do you want? Freedom of the body or freedom of the mind? For both you cannot have. One sentence like that is like, whoa, I can never have freedom of the body. Oh my God, thank you for telling me that. Oh, I gotta see if I got reactions to that, or because it's like you get one sentence like that and immediately your whole life, like you don't need a near-death experience, your whole life kind of flashes before you and you see like, oh my God, I've spent years, decades working on freedom of the body. Why would you have careers? Why would you do all these kind of meaningless things without the need for money? And what's the money for except that there's a belief underneath that you can actually use the money to attain freedom. The goal of freedom of the body.
Right.
More mobility, I can live where I want to live, I can eat the foods I want to eat, I can be with the people I want to be around. If I don't like the people, I'll just get my credit card out and go somewhere else, do something else. It's this trick that somehow freedom can be achieved through the body, and as the body as the central figure, Jesus calls it the hero of the dream, that the hero can be free of this dastardly dream and be a free hero. And then we hear about free countries and free human beings, a lot. It's a big trap. It's just a big trick. So then you start to open up more to your function, forgiveness, and you see that freedom is a state of mind that is attainable through forgiveness, through letting go of everything that you believe was real and true. And you actually feel excited and inspired that you can achieve the goal. And then the deeper you go, you realize that as long as you think it's a goal in the future, that's not it either.
No. I just like what you're saying, like you thought you were reaching the bottom of the hole, but it just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's very, very humbling. The ego mind, every time it thinks it's getting there or it understands something, it's never about that. It's like it's a blind spot. The ego can never. Every time it thinks it's so good, it's actually needs to be humbled, actually, just to see it's never about that. It's not about anything you can understand or grasp.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the floor falls out. I was reading the other day, somebody was talking about all these different Course in Miracles teachers, and they were talking about one teacher saying, oh, she's introduced the Course to so many thousands of people, and it's so wonderful that she's this, but she's a little political or this, and she doesn't really get the Course. She doesn't really understand where it's going. But there's these other ones that they are going to take you where it's going, they're going to take you all the way, and this and this and this. And yet that's still very commercialized and still to the point where those ones that are supposedly going to take you all the way would never advocate you actually giving up everything of the world. They would never say that. They would say that's crazy. That's going too far. That's way too radical. And yet, if you start to look at the message of the Course, if it's teaching you through forgiveness that the world's an illusion, and you're exposing everything that you believe that teaches you that it's real, the next obvious step would be to give up what is unreal.
Right.
You wouldn't keep it, and just talk about it and do endless seminars and write endless books and do there, unless there was a part of your mind that still wanted to keep it without letting it go. You see, so the ego is like going to try to go on the spiritual journey It doesn't care if it's like a piggybacking on, or it's a backpack coming along for the ride. It doesn't care what you do, as long as you still believe in the dream and you still want to perpetuate the dream in linear time. Then it's quite content, because it's not threatened.
Yeah.
It'll be a little bit shaky here and there when you make a move, but it's not threatened if you're going to keep the dream going and perpetuate the dream. But actually, what would be the point of exposing that's an illusion if you still were attached to it? If you still were clinging to it, if you're still holding on to it, what would be the point of exposing it? That could turn into a game, an exposing game.
Right.
And then pretty soon, there's all these other people that aren't getting it. They need to get it.
Right.
They need to hear it. Oh, I've got it, but they don't. I have to bring the light to them. You see how it's very sneaky. The ego's still in charge. It still is seeing an error.
Right.
It's still seeing somebody who's not getting it.
Right.
And it's trying to bring the light into the one that's not getting it. But there is no one out there that's not getting it. You know, it's the mind that is not getting it is the ego, and it made up a world of all these distractions, including people. It peopled the world. It literally peopled the world just to keep the dramas going, keep the distraction from be still and know that I'm God, from coming inside. So we're really, this is an experience of mysticism.
Right.
Not the words, not just talking the talk, but actually walking the walk, where you inevitably take the next step to give up what does not serve. Not just to talk about what does not serve, but to actually give it up. And then you have the peace of mind.
I remember either someone told me or I heard it myself that there are people who came to you and talk about other people, and your only response at that point was there seems to still be a value of attack thoughts, and that's really what it is, like sum up, not really getting into specifics of who is right and who is wrong. It is a value of attack thoughts, and like what you're saying, expose attack thought but not wanting to let it go. It's like these differences is still emphasized. We're different with different minds, and also they're like this victim mentality or just attack and defense. All of this, that's the true teaching, and that's the true experience. Is always going to be through dropping that and letting it go. It's never through talking beautiful talks and wearing beautiful spiritual dresses. It's about actual letting go of attack thoughts.
Yeah, I think, to me, it's always been, the experience is so important that everything pales in terms of opening to the experience. Everything. Nothing lays standing when you open up to this experience. So, like when I was deep into the course and I was very joyful in the early 1990s, I had people showing up saying, I am your student, just showing up. And inevitably, when they'd be around me and we'd be talking, we would get into these discussions, and they'd say, but what about my career, and what about my job, and what about my children, and what about my life? Come on, what about my life? And this is like radical. And so instead of trying to convince anybody or explain to anybody, I would tell them this Krishnamurti story, because I was very fond of Tara Singh, and he was very fond of Krishnamurti, and so the story goes, the parable where Krishnamurti was going around, like I do, around the world, just sharing these beautiful ideas, really this beautiful presence, and through sparkly eyes and humor and politeness and gentleness and all kinds of spectacular qualities. But Tara Singh really felt like he needed to come in the presence and just have like maybe 5 or 10 minutes with Krishnamurti. And so I tell the parable to the so-called students where he tries and tries and tries to get an audience with Krishnamurti. He just keeps writing, and Krishnamurti's always on the move. Kind of got an entourage moving around him and everything, and Tara Singh tried so hard, and finally he gets an audience with Krishnamurti. So he comes in, and his first question Krishnamurti sits across from him, smiling, looking in his eyes, and his first thing is, it's not really a question, it's Tara Singh starts in, I want enlightenment, I want self-realization, I want to know who I am, and he makes this big thing of, I want, to be a pure being, to know who I am, self-realization. He goes on with this whole little spiel, and then finally he stops, and Krishnamurti comes up with 3 words. What's stopping you? That's all Krishnamurti says. He just says, what's stopping you? Well, Tara Singh says, well, I'm a householder, I've got a family and a house and children, and goes another big spiel and everything. And then comes the final 2 words of the encounter. Krishnamurti just looks at him and says, drop them. Krishnamurti says 5 words. He goes all over the world to try to find Krishnamurti, and he says, what's stopping you? His only question, what's stopping you? And drop them. And that's it. That's the end of the encounter. Well, I tell this to the students, and they're like, oh, God, that's terrible. I said, terrible? I said, that's spectacular. I said, what do you want, peace of mind or not? I said, that's a beautiful parable. So there takes an honesty with the first part, what's stopping you? What am I invested in? Really, it's linear time, but as it plays out in the world, there's all this surface stuff that seems to be a huge investment of mind energy into lots and lots and lots of things, which really are just symbols of the desire to hang on to linear time, which is the desire to hang on to a false self-concept that God did not create, which is to perpetuate illusions. That's really all that this seeming world of change and all the distractions and idols and images, false pursuits, is just a mechanism to honor the desire to be separate, to honor the desire. Linear time is the honoring of the desire to be separate from God. And then drop them. Wow, that's amazingly gracious. Krishnamurti was amazingly gracious. Oftentimes Ramana Maharshi wouldn't even answer. He wouldn't even get a word out of him. Krishnamurti gives a gracious 2 words, drop them, and very. And then there's other stories where people would come and they would start with Krishnamurti, but then they would leave pretty quickly. And others would go, oh, what should we do? Should we run after them? No. You knew it was a matter of just willingness and desire, not a matter of chasing anybody, convincing anybody. It's just a state of mind. It doesn't have to be sought after. Nobody has to be converted or changed. Also, I loved how, that's what inspired me about Krishnamurti, was that he was so gentle, he was so kind, he was so patient, and he would very carefully go through the mind and the unwinding of the mind with such graciousness and presence, and then typically there would be people spinning out, reacting, interrupting. Imagine doing that with such grace and having people seemingly just constantly poking, prying, interrupting and everything like this. And he didn't react. He just didn't react at all. That's what floored me. I was stunned. After somebody would be really and seemingly viciously, he would say, please, please, madams, sirs. Madams, sirs? After somebody's just grilling you, yes, please, madams, sirs, can we come back to the point? Can we come back to this? With such a graciousness. It was almost like it was so high that there was no acknowledgement of a problem. And yet, that's exactly what it takes, to extend the moment. It takes this graciousness where you're not caught into anything. There's no reaction to whatever is
That's it.
That's
the teacher is the teaching.
Yes.
The messenger is the message. There is a merge. There is no talking about it and then at the same time reacting, or what is truly valued is demonstrated not through the teaching. The teaching can be talking about the world and blah blah blah, but the attitude is demonstrating what I'm valuing in this moment and every single moment, like peace. I remember you and I went to this beautiful island and being hosted by maybe like a wealthy couple, and they had these most beautiful houses, and at the end of the gathering he came up to you and said, it's really hard to let go of this worldly status and success. How do you see that? Because he probably sees you as a teacher, like a successful teacher or whatever, and I remember your reply was, success is peace of mind. And just like that is a simple answer to any question about what about status in the world, what about this in the world, and that is like what is truly valued. If it is peace of mind, freedom of the mind is truly valued, there is no other questions, there is no conflict. There is no conflict. And the conflict is only in the mind that values different things at the same time.
Yeah, we were just doing a session the other night about certainty and cluelessness, and truly, to be clueless, to not know anything about the world, is to not have any definitions of anything, or not to buy in any way. That just seems to be such freedom. But as soon as you define yourself, or you define God, or you define spirituality, or anything at all, it's the definitions that are the blocks. It's the definitions that are the judgments. And even what seems to be spiritual debates, it's really like, it's a joke to think that, because truth doesn't debate. There is nothing to debate, Truth does not fight against illusions, nor do illusions fight against the truth. Illusions battle only with themselves. It's an illusory battle. But as long as the mind's tied into these definitions, it's really tied into fantasies. And then it wants the fantasies more than the truth. And that's really what it comes down to. When you want truth, the experience of truth, not the words or the description or the word, but when you want the experience of truth more than anything else, then it is yours. It's always been yours, but it is yours in awareness. But as long as these fantasies still hold like an allure, there's an attraction there, then the truth is pushed out of awareness. And then the struggle becomes, how do I let go? Who is the I that's trying to let go of the fantasies? But the very fantasy itself. The ego is not wanting to let go of itself, or let go of the world that it made.
Yeah. I remember when I was doing the course lesson at early, before I was still working at the time, and I was driving to work, had a lot of busy tasks going on. Answer the call, then the next call come in, and listen to the voice message. I just like driving at the same time. Was just so much going on in my mind about the task of the day, and then I remember my lesson of that day was something like, I want peace, or peace.
Peace of God is all I want.
The peace of God is all I want. That was the lesson. And something happened when I just remembered that lesson. I suddenly jumped into this experience from this horrendous kind of business in my mind, suddenly just dropped into this vastness. And in that, I actually couldn't understand the lesson, because I thought, this is actually ridiculous. I'm peace. I am peace. Who is the I who wants peace? Like, this is ridiculous. But I was in that for a while, and then when I came back, like out of that experience, not only I could understand that lesson, but I thought that was very hard to achieve as well. But I just knew that the course and all the lessons are just really gentle stepstones to wake up the mind gradually from that, that dream state. It's really tailored for the mind that is asleep, and it's a very, very gentle wake up call gradually. And then you reach this state that even the course, it doesn't make sense anymore to the state of mind that is not sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting when people come to this community, sometimes they expect, kind of more of an academic community, but, there's that part of the course, the ego enjoys studying itself, and really this is really much more about the practical application, moment by moment by moment. So it's almost like the course or whatever theology or whatever route you take, it becomes more irrelevant and immaterial because the focus is on the practice and on the possibility, which is really an inevitability, that you're just going to drop into that state of mind and see, I am peace. That's what it's all about. It's not really about a scholastic thing or trying to, study the course like a discipline. It's actually a very practical course. And pretty soon it's like it just comes in and gets used occasionally, words here or there, but your life, your very life is the living demonstration of the course. It's the book was like the Zen master pointing at the moon. The book was kind of like the Zen master, and so there's no need to get caught in analyzing the course or
Analyzing anything.
Judging it.
Analyzing the mind.
Analyzing the mind. Yeah, that's the same for psychology as it is for spirituality, really.
I think the course is just graciously pointing at the patterns that has been hidden and not really been seen, and just pointing at that so that it can be seen. But it's not to be analyzed and studied. It's really just, okay, I see what's going on, and let me forgive this and drop this and come to an experience. So this is our let's stop and wake up.
That's it. Let's stop and wake up. That's well said. That's everything.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fun.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.